Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Forman. Today we have Jason Slezak with us. Jason is our original real team rider, multi-sporter, and also a Patagonia International Ambassador, quite involved with all of the R&D in a lot of different products. But today we're talking about Patagonia wetsuits and what is new in the Patagonia wetsuits for this year.
Yeah, we've been extremely excited to have a full sort of redesign and relaunch of the Patagonia wetsuit after, a few years of sort of sticking with the same design, sort of based on all of the COVID constraints that happened with materials and everything, which at the time was a little bit of a bummer, but turned out to be an amazing, new redesign based on taking that time to really focus on what wasn't working and what the limitations of the existing material sort of build out was.
Right.
And then how to really sort of from the ground up and specifically from our repair team, working with designers to bring us, at this point, the best wetsuit we've ever made.
Nice. Now I brought my elephant riding gear.
Nice.
And I am going to mount up on the elephant in the room, and I'm going to ride the elephant because I think that's important. There's a lot of pessimists out there, especially like with the eco thing, like eco anything, and let's just talk about in our sports, right? Like whether it be surfing or any of the wind sports that we're involved in, like eco is a good mission, but I think there's a lot of people that don't want to support they want to save the planet, but they don't want to support the eco mission if they're taking a hit on performance.
Yeah.
Right? And so in the past, the Patagonia suits were durable, like longest lasting, literally like they would outlast 2 of someone else's suits, maybe 3.
Yeah.
They were the warmest. They were the most wind resistant, so you didn't get like refrigerated if there was a breeze. They were not the lightest.
Correct.
And they were not the most flexible. And that's being kind on those last 2, right? What has changed in the latest generation?
So I think part of that, the answer to that question is to talk about sort of the Patagonia mission of making as eco-friendly and as sustainable a product across the board.
Right.
So when we first teamed up with Yulex and brought Yulex on in our suits, the full line of suits, and got away from virgin rubber or limestone rubber, eco-prene, or any of these other things that are a little more on paper, a little less environmentally hazardous, yet really still aren't doing anybody any favors.
Right.
We went 100% as eco as possible. And what that meant was working within the parameters of what was available. So at that time, it was recycled polyester for the face fabrics, recycled polyester for the lining fabrics, and then the Yulex rubber, kind of first gen Yulex rubber at that time.
Right.
Since then, we have work towards recycled nylon, which recycled nylon is stretchier than virgin nylon, and recycled nylon is considerably stretchier than polyester or recycled polyester, right? So now our sort of face fabric that you see on the outside of a suit, so any of this sort of stretchy, sort of spandexy face fabric or anything that's on the liner of the suit is recycled, has a recycled nylon component to it that increases the flex, increases the ease of paddling, ease of putting on and taking off. So now, essentially over the years of more brands adopting Yulex and putting them into their suits, more R&D over the years, and just helping to create a material that didn't exist in a recycled version. We are now able to have an equal amount of stretch, an equal amount of performance to those sort of high-end virgin suits that are out there from other brands.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I noticed like in the development of like the whole wetsuit program, like it was small, like pretty small increments of improvement, like on those like kind of different measured factors, like the weight and the flexibility and the performance of the suit. It was like small incremental improvements, but then this year, like with these new suits, it like went like this. When you first pick them up, they're like a lot softer in your hand. Like they're not like hard in your hand. They're a lot lighter. Like when you take it off the peg in the shop, like it's not like to the floor. Like you pick it up and it's like, okay, this is actually, there's a big improvement in the weight. But then also one of the things I noticed right away was all the external taping is gone. So can you tell us like where's the tape and why is it gone?
So, a few years back with our Yulex suits, we initially with the OG Patagonia wetsuit that had the wool lining, we were all stitched and no glued. Now the internal seams are still taped and glued.
Okay.
Which is critical for that non-leaky feeling and keeps everything nice and watertight. We at Patagonia had switched to glued seams because the industry had sort of pushed that way. And then over these past, 3 to 4 years specifically, but even longer than that since our wetsuit repair team has been working on suits, that glued seam is the first place to go on almost any suit. Whether that's UV damage and they start to crack, whether that's being folded up in the off season when you're not using it, whether it's it says don't hang your suit in the sun to dry,
and they hang the suit in the sun to dry.
Everybody that wants to go surfing again in a dry suit hangs their suit in the sun to dry, right? So that's going to deteriorate that glued seam, and then where does it usually go? Like where your board rubs against the crotch and then the crotch is leaking, where you're putting the suit on and off and you're pulling on the shoulder and now your shoulders are leaking every time you duck dive, right? So what we found is we worked directly with our designers, worked directly with the wetsuit repair team to truly pick apart these suits by how many times they've taken them apart and had to replace panels and seeing where those weak points are. And our first and foremost one was that the glued seams were a fail point, and it's much easier to fix a stitch seam and it's much less likely to come undone on you, sort of like a zipper, meaning you can take that glued seam that starts to go and sometimes it snags on something and just peels right off.
Yeah.
So
now to clarify, like for the viewers, when you're saying glued seam, we're talking about the external glue that's visible. Yeah, right. It's almost like pinstriping on the
that sort
seams.
Of external smooth seam that people are used to seeing on suits that would cover this area that we're looking at stitching on these. Again, that was sort of the sort of first thing that would go, right? So now we've eliminated that. Everything internally is still glued on the inside and taped, which is very, what you're going to see across the board on high-end wetsuits, which is keeping that water from leaking in, and it's keeping the seam nice and tight on the inside. But the outer stitch is much more reliable, much more repairable. Even in a remote situation, if you had a sewing kit and you were on a trip and you couldn't get it back to the Patagonia wetsuit repair team, you essentially could fix your own suit temporarily to make it through. You're on a cold water surf trip. You don't want a seam to go and then that ruins your entire trip. So you can feasibly take care of it, get it back to the Patagonia wetsuit repair team, and then they can get you back into a new suit. Part
of the weight reduction and then also the increase in flexibility, I got to think is from, at least part of it is from removing all of that external glue. Because no matter how stretchy you make the fabric, if it's bound by that glue, which is not going to be as stretchy as the neoprene, then, or not the Yulex, then that's going to be the restraining thing that holds it back. Yeah, and that's also, if you take the amount of glue that it took to glue all those seams and the amount of thread, and you kind of weighed them side by side, the thread's going to be a lot lighter. Right. The thread actually allows for more mobility and just provides, again, a more sort of consistently bound together patterning for the seaming of the wetsuits. Yeah, I mean, I can attest that like the suit itself, even though those seams would the glue would break down, and you would start getting like visible cracking in it or peeling, like you would catch something like a section of it would rip off. The suit itself was still totally fine. It was just like a optical thing, like looking at it, it's an aesthetic thing. But it's interesting, like what you're saying, like the repair guys are that involved in this. So it's not just like some visionary that's like, oh, this is going to work and I know it's going to work, but without any proof behind it, like getting those guys and girls involved is huge. Yeah, and sometimes early on in the design of some of the original suits when we didn't have the repair team, that's what it was. It was a designer that had an idea and they would kind of create that, but that didn't mean it sort of held up in the real world. Yeah. And much like, you're passionate about surfing, I'm passionate about surfing and kite surfing and these sports, the men and women behind that repair crew are equally as passionate about fixing suits, wanting people to be in a suit that lasts long and wanting to help build the best suit possible. One, it makes their job easier because they can fix the suits that do, still have something that goes wrong, but also just
for that pride to get somebody into a suit that's going to perform the way they want it to.
Yeah. Well, they want it to perform for themselves. Like every time that I go
100%.
there and visit the repair center, just to like check in and like see what they're working on and stuff. Like there's like wetsuits hanging over the rail. That it's obviously just came out of the water.
Oh yeah,
the grill's going, the dogs are there. Like they're just having like an awesome time. But it's
Yeah.
like they're interested in the product working as well.
Yeah, I mean, that crew, lives and breathes surfing. They're at C Street in California, which is really close. The Patagonia headquarters are there. They can go down and surf all the time, and they're in and out of the water every single day.
Yeah.
And then for those who don't know sort of Yulex or what that is a eco-friendly plant-based rubber that's harvested from the Hevea tree. And so it's basically a grown rubber versus a petroleum-based product. So it is something that is genuinely better for the environment. And then with this new suit, we have been working on for 6 years developing an end-of-life circularity for suits. So essentially now, old wetsuit can be taken back in, broken down into carbon black, which is what's used to dye all of the exterior fabrics that you see. It's used to, dye the interior lining that you can see on these suits, which is your recycled nylon and polyester based Jerry camo.
You gotta have Jerry camo in there,
Lopez
dude. You gotta
camo.
have Jerry camo in there.
But all of this is our first suit that's really proved that concept where now, if an old suit sort of dies and gets to the end of its life, it can actually be broken down into carbon black. We solution dye these fabrics, which mean that the yarns are actually dyed, which saves somewhere around 80 to 85% of the water consumption in dyeing a suit.
Yep.
And then same thing with the Yulex-based rubber. I want to say it's 85% less CO2 emissions than your traditional like neoprene suit.
Right.
And both of those for wetsuit design, and again, for the sustainability of all of our future and future generations is super, super important.
So Jason, what do you got going on with the cuff right there? I got a little smiley face.
So, these suits are the Yulex Regulator suits.
Okay.
That's been our R series for years. So Patagonia has had R1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but a lot of people didn't know what the R stood for.
Yep.
So it's actually back in the name. So these are our Yulex Regulator suits. You can see on our new suits, we have our little smiley face dude. He is proud to be neoprene free.
He is stoked.
Yeah, and this is in all our new suits, and it's a campaign that we came away with, just claiming we are full eco in that sense. But that sort of ties right into your suit here, which has a little bit of an orange designation.
Yep.
Mine, which is green. So I have the R2. You have the R3. And what that is we've never really gone straight with just 2 mil, 3.2, 4.3, 5.4, and the like. There's a lot of areas where we find we can do. The Yulex has a little bit more of a insulation layer to it, as well as with our linings. So we have some suits that are 2.5 or 3.5 or 4.5 in certain areas.
Yeah.
So
they're also, it's denser, right? There's like less air blown into it. It's a little bit denser, and that might be the wind resistant.
Yeah, that is a little bit. Yeah,
as well.
You don't have as much aeration in the material, that sort of core material of the suit as much.
Okay.
So we have R1, which is designated by a small blue icon on the sleeve, and or somewhere on the suit for, say, the shorties or the vests or the things that are not long sleeve. And we have an R2, which is our green designation here. We have an R3, orange, R4, red, and R5 being the thickest, and it's white. So that's for your frigid sort of Arctic.
Like that's Alaska. Like your Maine, Alaska.
Yeah. I wear them in the Northwest in the wintertime when it's miserable and cold and rainy. And,
yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of our warmest suit. So those Regulator series, R1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are our thickness and warmth designations. I
like that they at least gave the info. They're like it's sort of like shapers that don't give leaders on boards, and people get all tripped out. They're like, I just can't figure it out. There was a little bit of a like sorcery going on, like some magic with the R series, but like people not quite understanding it.
Right.
And so like like the debrief that you just gave makes total sense, but then they also give you the numbers, so like this R3 is 4.5, 3.5.
Yeah, which is 4.5 in the body or core of your wetsuit, and then 3.5 in the extremities, so arms and legs. R2 here, we've got 3.5 and 3 mil. So again, 3.5 in the core and 3 mil in your arms and legs, and so on.
So you're showing the neoprene-free logo. I'm looking here at the orange logo, and I'm noticing that like the Batman, like the Kevlar Batman deflector cuffs and the wrists and the ankles are gone. What's up with that change?
James Bond bulletproof cuff. Yeah.
Right?
That was at a point, it was again a little bit of our maybe overbuild of the suit in the most stretched out and aggressively pulled on areas. Putting your suit on and off, you're always sort of pulling on your wrist and your ankles when you're flipping the suit inside out, or you're putting the thing on because you're frothing to get out in the water.
Yeah.
And there was a point where, again, with our little older recycled polyester, it didn't have as much stretch to it. So people would be pulling, they'd still be stretching, and we had to have something that sort of held back that area so it didn't become a problematic blowout or seam tear. Whereas with the new recycled nylon content in both the face fabric, inside and outside of that Yulex rubber, we are able to eliminate that, which again, back to your weight, it eliminates weight.
Yep.
It eliminates a little bit of that sort of bulkiness and sort of just overbuilt parts of the suit. And really, again, working with our wetsuit repair team, we realized that with these new performance materials, we weren't finding nearly as many issues in those sort of wrist cuff and ankle cuff areas.
Yeah. The weight savings like this year is real. Like Jeffrey will help me out. Like I've been holding this suit up for what seems like,
I mean, you're bulking up. Though.
Like 10 minutes, right? Yeah. Probably 10, maybe 11 minutes. Yeah. Like the old suit, absolutely no way. Like my arm would at some point give out.
You would have had to take a break.
We would have had it, yeah. And this is all one take. So the thing's still here. It might even go higher at some point. I might do the Iron Cross like this.
Oh, yeah.
But the weight savings is significant on the new suits. And that was like one of the things I noticed right away, the weight, the hand on the suit, like how much softer it is.
Oh, it's amazing.
And the flexibility, which like we talked about, but there's still a break-in period. Like you put them on and they feel way better than the old ones, like the very first time you put them on. But they actually feel better over time, which is the opposite of some of the other brands of suits where they feel awesome the first time and not so good later on.
And I mean, going back to a little bit of what we were talking about yesterday is this sort of equipment idea. Even as a surfer, when you get a brand new surfboard, it somewhat feels better after it has a little bit of that heel depression for where your front foot's going to go, and just sort of this little bit of a break into you, much like skiers and snowboarders do with their boots or different pieces of equipment that you use in different sports. And part of that is that sort of natural component to this. Is it's not a in a lab created rubber that has air put into it specifically to have all this stretch. So it is something that's a created in nature material.
Yeah.
So that break-in period is part of a component of that. But again, it will outlast all of your suits. They do fall under the Patagonia Ironclad guarantee for repair and or replacement if deemed necessary within reason.
Yeah. But that doesn't cover like running it over with your car.
Or dragging it behind your car.
Or skidding on it like at high speeds.
Yeah, or running and sliding across the parking lot because you're super stoked on your barrel that you just got at the lighthouse.
Yep, that doesn't work.
No.
Okay. But they will repair it, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But not replace it for that.
No, it's not a replacement. No. The weight is a big, like I said, the weight and the reduction of weight is noticeable. And like what I noticed is that like these two suits, like this is my California quiver, like when I'm out in California and I'm surfing like Rincon and Ventura, like and all those different breaks around there. I have an R2 like crew neck and I have the R3 hooded, and that kind of covers everything. And what I noticed in this year's suit specifically is that I don't care about like the paddle ability anymore. Like I'm not always trying to go with like less wetsuit so it paddles better, because I think that's like kind of ingrained in people's minds in the last, like whether it be Patagonia suits or any other suits, like they're like, there's always like this cheater in your head that's like convincing you to go with the lighter suit so that you could paddle better.
Yeah.
You know, but the truth of the matter is that if you get cold, you get really stiff, and then you paddle worse. You know, and then you surf worse, or you kite worse, or whatever. So with the suits being as light as they are now, like I'm actually going the other way. Like I look at it, and if I'm on the fence, I go with the warmer one, because the weight doesn't matter because I don't weigh anything anymore, and the flexibility is so good that it doesn't hold you back.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would rather be warmer and session longer than anybody else out there.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that one.
Awesome, Jason. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to pick your brain, like on like what's going on in Patagonia, and then also the specifics on the latest generation Yulex wetsuits. If any of you out there have any questions on any of the Patagonia wetsuits or would like to place an order for one, you can always reach us at the shop, 252-987-6000, or look us up online, realwatersports.com. Thanks for tuning in. Could be better though. That's good. It's like a. Oh, that one sucked. Yep. No, that's bad. Oh, that's the pop we were looking for. Oh, yeah.